Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy stories packed with drama, justice, and a sprinkle of revenge, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our incredible stories. My stepsister stole my dad's watch to cover her car expenses, and with my stepmother's help, they framed me for it. My dad accused me of being crazy like my mom and kicked me out at 17. 4 years later, at Grandpa's 75th birthday party, the truth came out, and my dad's reaction was priceless. Let me take you back to where it all began. My relationship with my dad was always strained, at best. My stepsister hated me for no reason, and her mother encouraged her to make my life miserable. Whenever they lied about me, my dad sided with them without a second thought. Over time, I realized no one in that house cared for me, so I withdrew into myself. But that didn't stop my stepsister. When my dad's expensive watch went missing, they immediately blamed me. Despite my innocence, their lies painted me as guilty. Little did they know, karma has a way of catching up, and it all unraveled at Grandpa's birthday toast. I tried to defend myself, but it was like talking to a wall. My dad was already convinced that I was just like my mom, whom he always called crazy and lunatic, and that I had to leave. He kicked me out right there. I was 17 years old with no plans, and no place to go except to my mom's house, which I did for the next 4 years. I was taken aback by what my stepmom and stepsister were accusing me of, and I didn't even know the watch was missing, let alone have anything to do with it. It hurt me a lot that my dad accepted their version of events without even attempting to confirm with me whether or not that was the case. I tried to move on and concentrate on rebuilding my life, trying not to think about how betrayed I felt by my mom, who is not very mentally stable and needs a lot of attention. I knew in my heart that I didn't take that watch, but they didn't care. I called him, texted him, and cleared my name. Consumed my life. However, if there was one good thing that came out of it, it was that I was able to spend quality time with my mother. I graduated from high school and college, and my dad missed both events. It hurts a lot, but it gets better with time. A few weeks ago, my grandpa turned 75, and despite everything, I was invited to his birthday party at this farmhouse he had rented for the day. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go because I knew my dad's stepmother and steps. Grandpa and I had always been close, and he helped me when my dad kicked me out. He lived in a retirement home, so he couldn't really help me with housing, but he did help me out financially. He was also my best friend, and we got along like a house on fire, so I knew I couldn't miss such a big milestone for him, so I just sucked it up and went. After 4 years of sitting with my stepmother and stepfather, I felt all the old tension return when I walked into the party. I tried my best to spend most of my time with other relatives and avoid any interaction with them, but my stepsister didn't even look at me, and my stepmother had this smug look on her face, which made me feel even worse. I kept my distance, but I will admit that every time I happened to look over at my dad, my stepmother or my stepsister, I felt this huge lump in my throat and had to physically fight back my tears. And confront them in front of everyone, but I knew that I couldn't ruin a day that was supposed to honor my grandfather. I was just trying to get through the celebration when something completely unexpected happened. At one point, my family and all of Grandpa's friends started chanting and asking him to make a toast because it was his birthday. Grandpa accepted and got up, saying that he was grateful that everyone had come and that he had many amazing memories with each and every one of them. Person there on that particular day, but then he suddenly began discussing my father's missing watch. He claimed to have recently learned the truth about it and that my stepsister had stolen it. I'm not lying when I say that I felt my heart stop. Grandpa explained that a week prior to the celebration, he had been chatting with an old friend who ran a pawn shop. They were reminiscing about the past when my dad's missing watch suddenly came up. His friend also mentioned that a few years ago, someone had entered his. Grandpa showed him a picture of a very similar watch, and sure enough, the guy remembered it immediately. He had written down the name and ID of the seller, who turned out to be my stepsister. After a little prodding on my part, his friend informed him that my stepsister had been so distraught about the reason she was selling the watch that she had told his friend the precise reason she was pawning off such a costly watch. She even told him that she would have her mother come up with something so she wouldn't get in trouble with me and Dad. It turns out that my stepsister sold the watch to pay for some car expenses back then. She had been drinking when she got into a minor accident and completely wrecked the front of her car, so instead of asking for help, she stole my dad's watch and took it off. I'm not sure what she did with the remaining money, but she knew that if my dad found out, she would be in serious trouble, so she and my stepmother made up the story about. When my grandpa's friend first admitted that my stepsister was the one who sold him the watch, my grandpa was shocked. However, after doing some research, he was able to determine that his friend was telling the truth. Grandpa also disclosed that he had considered saying something immediately but chose to wait until his party so he could tell everyone about it. He wanted to confront my dad, my stepsister, and my stepmother all at once in front of everyone. So he could humiliate everyone and clear my name. The room fell silent as soon as Grandpa finished his toast. My dad's face went white, and my stepsister just froze. My stepmother looked like she had seen a ghost. I wasn't sure how to feel. I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, but mostly I just felt numb, as if all the hurt and rage I had been suppressing for the past 4 years suddenly came flooding back. I didn't stay for the fallout after Grandpa dropped that bombshell. I had waited so long to be proven innocent, but now that it had happened, I didn't feel the relief I had hoped for. Instead, I felt empty. My grandpa came over to check on me the following morning, and he was genuinely concerned that he had done something wrong by bringing up my family's drama in front of our entire family. I left the party because I couldn't handle my dad's reaction or whatever was going to happen next. I just needed to get out of there and process everything on my own. Family and his friends, but I reassured him that I was really appreciative of what he had done for me. He said he understood how I might be feeling and advised me not to make any snap decisions about my father. He assured me that he would support me no matter what I decided to do about my relationship with my father and that he would have my back no matter what my father or his family said about me. I'm not sure what to do now because my dad has been attempting to reach me constantly since the party, the majority of his voice calls and texts. The messages began with him saying that he was sorry and that he wanted to make things right. Then, gradually, they began to discuss how I had allegedly brainwashed his father and attempted to destroy his relationship with my stepmother. Of course, that hurt a lot. I mean, is there any way that this man would choose me over his rotten wife and daughter? I'm not sure how to handle this, but I'm still getting calls from my dad asking to meet and discuss everything that happened. What should I do? I don't think my dad will ever apologize, especially after his recent texts about me brainwashing my grandfather. However, even if he does, I don't think I can ever trust him again because I felt for 4 years that I didn't matter to him and that he could just throw me out like that. As for my stepmother and stepsister, I haven't heard from them and, to be honest, I don't want to because they destroyed my relationship with my dad and completely upended my life. I don't think I could ever forgive them for that. It's been a week since I last posted here, and I can't even begin to count the number of messages and comments I received pleading for an update. First of all, thank you to everyone who left a comment and sympathized with me. I appreciate all of the advice you gave me, and your critic is Ms. It's also amazing how many people genuinely cared about what I was going through. Many of you advised me to stop communicating with my dad, while others suggested giving him an opportunity to explain himself, and I ultimately decided to meet with him despite my gut telling me not to. I'm not sure why I agreed to it. Perhaps I just wanted closure, or perhaps I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though I wasn't sure if he deserved it. However, there was a tiny part of me that hoped he would finally show some genuine regret and prove that he was sorry for what he did, so I texted him back and agreed to meet at a cafe we used to frequent when I was younger. I thought it would be a good neutral ground. He was sitting there looking a little anxious when I walked in. It was strange to see him after all that had happened at Grandpa's party, and for a moment I thought maybe things would return to normal, but that feeling didn't last long. He began by saying he was sorry, saying he knew he had made a mistake and that he was sorry for believing my stepmother and stepsister. He talked about how difficult it has been for him since the truth came out and how he feels like he failed as a father. At first, I was beginning to soften. I thought there might be a slim chance that we could at least try to mend some sort of relationship, but then things took a turn for the worse. He went on a lengthy tirade about how he had been under a lot of pressure at the time and that he wasn't sure what to believe. I mean, I understand, but that doesn't justify throwing me aside for 4 years. Then he started accusing me of manipulating Grandpa, saying he wasn't completely sure I hadn't done something to turn Grandpa against him and humiliate his feelings. I was so shocked by my dad's accusation that I was unable to speak at first. He basically acknowledged that he still didn't fully trust me, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just sat there and stared at him, trying to figure out how he could say something like that after all those texts about him wanting to make things right and now wanting me to apologize. At that point, I began to realize that this meeting was a huge mistake and that he wasn't here to apologize, at least not sincerely. I called him out on it and told him that it wasn't fair for him to blame me for any of this. I reminded him that he was the one who decided to believe my stepmother and stepsister without even giving me an opportunity to defend myself, but instead of accepting responsibility, he doubled down and said that I was being unfair to him and that it wasn't his fault because they meant that my stepmother and stepsister had deceived him. He even suggested that perhaps I should forgive them because family is family. I told him that I didn't want to hear from him anymore unless he could honestly take responsibility for his actions, and I got up and left after that meeting because, at the very least, I felt weird. I'm glad that I finally confronted him and saw his true colors, but I'm angry that he still couldn't just own up to what he did. He's still more concerned with regarding how the rest of the family perceives things rather than actually working on our relationship. I feel like I've wasted a lot of time hoping for some sort of resolution only to find out it's never going to happen. To make matters worse, I learned from one of my cousins that my stepmother and stepsister have been attempting to spin the tale once more, telling anyone who will listen that I'm exaggerating everything. My cousin even claimed that my stepsister was boasting that their side of the family is still intact. I'm the one isolating myself, and I'm not sure what will happen next, but for now, I'm done with them all. My dad is obviously not going to change, and my stepmother and stepsister have already caused me enough pain, so yeah, that's where I am. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm definitely not rushing into forgiving anyone anytime soon. Update 2. Okay, so I wasn't planning on updating again, but things have gotten so out of control that I thought I was. After that meeting with my dad, I went no contact, blocked his number, and ignored any family members who tried to guilt me into giving him another chance. However, 2 weeks after my meeting with my dad, my grandpa called and asked if I could come over to talk. I wasn't sure what it was about, but evidently my family had other plans. Remember how I said my dad's stepmother and stepsister were still trying to spin the situation? Well, let's just say that backfired spectacularly. Grandpa was the only person who supported me during this whole ordeal, so I thought I would listen to him. He basically told me that he had discovered some evidence while looking through some old financial records of the company. He had been suspicious for some time, especially about everything that happened with the watch, and he decided to do some research. What he discovered shocked him even more. It turned out that my stepsister and stepmother had been siphoning money behind everyone's backs for years. It turns out that my stepsister had a very poor grasp of how credit cards operated, and she probably didn't realize that when she made purchases out of the company's accounts, my grandpa would have been able to see where all the transactions had been made. When he saw transactions for nail appointments and hair blowouts, he knew for sure that the company had taken credit out of my dad's accounts and accrued debt that they had concealed from the rest of the family. My stepsister was the next obvious suspect because, in addition to the fact that it wasn't my dad, my stepmother always kept her nails trimmed and was adamant about never damaging her hair with heat. He also discovered that my stepsister had taken out a fictitious loan in my dad's name to finance my stepsister's extravagant habits, which hadn't been stopped for years. My dad was unaware that Grandpa had decided he'd had enough of their lives, but instead of filing charges, he took matters into his own hands in a way that only everything that was supposed to go to my dad is now going somewhere else, including a sizable portion that's coming to me. Grandpa claimed that by supporting my stepmother and stepsister for all these years, my dad had demonstrated that he wasn't responsible enough to handle the family's legacy. In addition, he kicked me out with nowhere to go, and even after the truth came to light, my dad disinherited everything. In addition to disinheriting my dad, Grandpa made sure that my stepsister and stepmother couldn't access any family funds. He had his lawyer prevent them from accessing any trusts or family assets, so everything they believed they would be able to get their greedy little hands on is gone, and Grandpa is even going to help my dad sell his house. My dad still refused to apologize to me, and he made my grandpa want to leave my dad with nothing at all. That none of them can continue to take advantage of him financially, they're going to be totally cut off. But that's not all. It seems like my stepmom had a complete breakdown when she learned what Grandpa had done. She attempted to coerce my dad into retaliating against Grandpa, but there is nothing they can do legally. My dad is stuck because he neglected to safeguard his finances, so he is now at the mercy of whatever my stepmom and stepsister want to do next, and the worst part is that my stepsister had the audacity to do it. She sent me a prophetic message after everything happened, essentially pleading for help because she has no money left to pay her bills or maintain her lifestyle since Grandpa's cut them off. She even attempted to fabricate a heartbreaking story about how she never intended for things to get so bad and that she's been under pressure from our stepmother the entire time. To be honest, the fact that she had the audacity to text me about her struggles when she was the reason I was living on the streets at the age of 17 made. She made her bed and now she has to lie in it. I don't feel bad for her at all because she and her mother ruined my relationship with my dad and tried to ruin my life, so why should I care what happens to them? Grandpa warned me that they might try to turn this back on me, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. This made me red even when she was reaching out to me because she couldn't seem to take responsibility for her actions and instead blamed it on her mother. As the bad guy again, which leads me to my dad, he's a mess. He keeps texting and calling, but I only replied after I told him that I'm not interested in dating until he's ready to accept full responsibility for what happened and stop blaming others. I can't keep going through this cycle of forgiveness and betrayal only to get hurt again. There's still a lot up in the air, especially with the way my dad is handling everything. I wonder if he will ever completely sever ties with my stepmother and stepsister or if. Update 3. I was unsure whether I would post another update, but a lot has happened, so I thought it would be a good time to tie up all the loose ends. If you've been following my story, you'll know that my life has been one crazy roller coaster of family drama, but I can finally say that things are looking up for me and not so much for the rest of them. He's just too caught up in their lies to see the truth. I suppose we'll see. My dad is in financial ruin. Grandpa wasn't lying when he said he was selling that house. It turns out that he wasn't just helping my dad sell it, he was forcing it. Grandpa technically owns the property, but my dad was only living there under some fancy trust arrangement that Grandpa controlled. As a result, when my grandpa severed all financial ties with my dad, it meant that the house that my dad owned was no longer under his control. The house my dad was living in was no longer his, but my grandfather gave him a chance and told him that he would allow him to stay there as long as my dad kicked out my stepmother and stepsister. Naturally, my dad couldn't abandon the woman who destroyed his life, so Grandpa decided to pull a fast one. Within a week, the house was up for sale, and they had 30 days to leave. Apparently, the news didn't sit well with my stepmother, who had a public outburst. My stepsister tried to get my dad to sell some of his remaining personal belongings so she could continue to pay off her car loan, so sometimes I think I escaped a bullet by not properly growing up under my dad's care because otherwise I would have ended up just as spoiled and shameless as my stepsister. It's hilarious that agents threaten my grandpa with lawyers because her lawyer has already told her she doesn't have a leg to stand on and even tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back. Adjust to their new life, which was not surprising given that they were cut off. My stepsister lost all access to the luxuries she had become so accustomed to, including expensive trips and shopping sprees. To be honest, I was somewhat relieved about this. I believe she needed a reality check, and this was a great one. However, I haven't heard from her since I reprimanded her in my last update, so I assume she's too busy trying to figure out how to survive without stealing from my dad and Grandpa's wealth. But for my dad, my stepmother tried a last-ditch effort and filed for divorce on his behalf. Yes, the woman my dad gave everything for abandoned him, and she could have foreseen it perfectly. She reasoned that since my dad was now essentially broke, there was no reason to stay, and she likely believed she could receive a sizable settlement from him. However, Grandpa made sure that all of the assets were out of her grasp, so now she has nothing. I can't say that I'm surprised, but she was always only interested in the money, and once that dried up, she left. As for my dad, I haven't spoken to him since I told him that I wasn't ready for a relationship until he accepted full responsibility for everything, and to be honest, I think that will remain the case for some time. He's still living in denial, holding on to the idea that something went wrong, and he won't acknowledge how he allowed himself to be manipulated by my stepmother and stepsister until he can confess his feelings. Grandpa, on the other hand, is doing fantastic. He's been a rock for me through everything, and we've grown even closer since everything came to light. We've talked a lot about the future, and he's made it clear that he wants to make sure I'm taken care of, especially after everything I've been through. So, I guess this is the end of the road for this saga. My dad, stepmom, stepsister, and I'm finally facing the consequences of their actions. Moving on with my life, I'm in a much better place now, both financially and emotionally, and I don't intend to let any of them bring me down again. It's been a crazy journey, but I'm proud of where I've come. I want to return here someday, perhaps in 5 years, to share with you how much better my life has gotten.